slot, or neither did I.
No.
No, he was on when I was there.
Yeah.
So it was Sanford did, yeah, okay.
Okay, so I'm gonna have Kyle push the magic button on the YouTube end and we'll be all set. We're good.
Okay. Sorry, I'm not getting all everybody's. There we go. Gallery view. Hadn't seen everybody.
What, is this a public one?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, they're all public. All right, let's call this meeting to order. Welcome everybody and thank you for coming. Let's dive right in. Agenda item number 1, current staffing levels.
Okay, so what I had done is I outlined for you all in the PDF document I sent called current staffing levels, all of the different positions, how many hours per week they work, and also I highlighted the vacant positions that we have as of right now. And this also included any on-call hours that were coming through, and also our temporary library assistant who has been in place since January. So to just go through a few things, the main library is open 24 hours a week and is offering services 53 hours. So we have those separate building hours, which are limited so that we have extra time for cleaning after the building closes, and to sort of just let everything settle from having a good amount of people coming through each day. And then we are still here in the building our regular hours so that we can provide outdoor pickup services and phone reference calls. The Union Library is open their normal 10 hours per week, and we are required by the OLS minimum standards to have at least two staff members in the building for safety. This does not include pages, which we are very light on right now anyway. And then we supplement with volunteers from Union Public Library Association at Union Library. So that's just a sort of overview of what the library is operating at right now. As you know, a lot of our summer reading, well, all of our summer reading programs, all of our general library programs and services, they underwent a significant upheaval, which has taken a lot of time on our library department heads. And to make sure that we can adjust those services to still have them. The summer is typically our busiest season. And despite being open for limited hours and also having limited summer reading offerings here at the library, most are take-home kits, doing things like that has taken a lot of staff time. So that leaves very little time for desk time. I have also been absolutely shocked by the amount of phone calls we've been getting. Overall, we can do as much as we can as far as promotion goes, but some just feel more comfortable calling the library prior to actually visiting so that they can make sure that, you know, they're in compliance with mask mandates, any sort of, you know, services that we may have added and they might not have seen, then they can know what's going on here. And pickup services have been wildly popular, and I'm very happy about this, that we're able to provide this kind of service. It is incredibly time consuming because we are wiping down all of the items that are going into bags for pickup, and also we are attempting to clean every single Tiverton item before it goes back to our shelves as well. So normally we would just check books in, they would be sorted and back to the shelves they go, but it is quite a process at this time right now. So I had put some notes into this document I had sent you all in my director summary about specific staff members. And I'm just going to ask that during this meeting, we use their titles instead of their names. If you have any questions, would you like me to go through my section that says notes on staff time, or would you like to use this time for some questions?
Chris and Kim, any comments?
But we've already seen the questions that Pam had shared. And so if your answers to those questions are in that, Catherine, then for me, at least, I'm thinking that it would make sense for you to address what you had written.
Sure. I wasn't aware of all of the questions that were coming from the treasurer. So I did just put some answers in here. I can certainly read through them right now. And if I've missed anything, feel free to ask. So I'll go ahead and start. So we were in the process of hiring a temporary library assistant back in March 2020 to cover some of the hours that were not being filled due to the young adult librarian's family leave. But once we closed for COVID, that was sort of squashed. We had a great candidate, but that person had other commitments to their family. So it actually worked out both ways, that we weren't able to offer that person the job and that they weren't able to take it. So during our COVID-19 closure, our staff performed a full inventory of the collection. I have to say, this is periodically done in libraries. And as far as the staff who have been here for 15 plus years could remember, this had never been done here. So this was a massive undertaking. And what usually happens with inventory, I think I've spoken a little bit about this in our in our regular trustee meetings, is that we physically touched every single book in this library and scanned it in, made sure that the record in our database was accurate and free of errors, and many of them were not. And so finally, then it goes back on the shelf, and we also have to make sure that the collection is in order before we were reopening. So to go through all of the items that we have here, over 50,000 items, and also at the Union Library, was definitely needed. And I'm very happy that we did it. I have no regrets that we were able to go through that process. So our staff were working during the shutdown, and they were also answering the phone for phone reference questions. This is a service that I feel was incredibly helpful to a lot of patrons. We were also the department who was calling the senior centers members to check in, make sure they were doing well, see if they needed anything. And going on also, we have a library assistant one. We actually have 2 library assistant ones. There is a vacant position right now, and that was vacated by our now technology coordinator, who was promoted when our previous technology coordinator left. So I have left one of those library assistant 1 positions open. It is the position that has more hours at 19 hours a week. So we do have our other library assistant one working slightly over the average of what she usually works in order to help fill desk time. So she normally works on average 12 and a half hours per week, and she's currently working 15 hours per week, which is averaged. 1 week is 12 hours for payroll, the next week is 18 hours, and so those average to 15. And this has helped us immensely because we had our temporary absence of our reference librarian, this vacancy of the other library assistant position, and also the young adult librarian is still here on limited time due to family leave until the beginning of October 2020. So moving on, our on-call hours fluctuate depending on vacation and sick time. So it really depends on the week. And then I do not plan on hiring a new library assistant 1 or library pages until at least the end of 2020 or beginning of 2021. Our library page who was with us through the summer has actually gone to college. So that individual is no longer here. We actually only have 2 hours worth of page time per week. So the rest of the staff are shelving. Okay, so that was my notes on staff time. If there were any other questions that I didn't answer, I am more than happy to field those now, or I can go into the budgetary impact.
Anyone have questions? And we have all read the treasurer's concerns, is that correct?
Yes.
Okay.
Okay, so if there's no questions on that section, I'll go into budgetary impact. So we have not finalized our fiscal year 21 salaries line at this time. We actually haven't finalized any of the lines. Everything is still in flux until the FTR on September 26th. So what we've been doing, and I know I spoke about this at the last regular trustees meeting, is we used our fiscal year 20 budget that we started out with at the very beginning of fiscal year 20 and rolled that into fiscal year 21, just so we can sort of gauge where we are as opposed to last year. So as far as payroll goes, I ran those numbers this week and our payroll is already $3,500 less since July 1st, 2020, which is a good thing. We definitely want to make sure we're very careful with payroll, and that's why we have very limited on-call hours. Staff are already covering for each other if somebody is out sick or if somebody is on vacation. Occasionally, you will still see me at the desk, which I think is very helpful from my standpoint because I can see how library services are working. And also I do know a lot of our patrons, and it's always nice to be able to see them and hear firsthand how everything's going, what services they might want to see next, and see how we can work that into our plan. So everybody is very thinly stretched at this point. We are trying our very best to sort of feel our way through a situation where there is no handbook. We are writing the handbook right now on how library services should operate during a pandemic. So that is sort of an overall look at the budget. I anticipate seeing savings every single payroll until we hire additional staff. And as I said, that would not be well until in fiscal year 21. With summer reading ending, our department heads will be more available for desk time. When library hours eventually increase, which I'm hoping will be quite soon, depending on how going back to school and how the colleges and universities are doing with the pandemic. So there's a lot of moving parts to our payroll and our personnel status right now. It will never be fit in sort of like a nice box with an exact number of what payroll will be. So the best that I will do each payroll, as I have been doing, is making sure that staff members are sticking to their hours, that we're not calling in somebody unnecessarily. We never have done that, nor do I ever want to be in a position where I see myself doing that. So that is the overall look at where our current staff levels are.
Sorry, did you say that payroll is currently 3,500 below last year's numbers at this time?
Yes, correct. And I do anticipate seeing that increase over the payroll periods.
And that 3,500 is a cumulative number.
That's correct, since July 1st. And we are all aware that we will not be receiving capital, so those savings are going to be key as far as our building needs go. We had the exterior work performed last week on the building, so I already know that invoice is sitting in our office administrator's desk, so things are still moving and things still have to be moving as far as our building maintenance goes. So we're trying to make sure we're as careful as possible in other areas of the budget.
All right, so we have read, excuse me, what our treasurer's concerns, and we have now heard our director's explanations. Chris and Kim, do we have any comments about what we've heard?
Chris, why don't you go first this time?
No, it's just what's going on with the pandemic. I mean, things are topsy-turvy. They have been for a while. Seems like it's not going to stop anytime soon. We just don't know. I also think that and it also related to the pandemic was the casino money didn't come through. We got a $1 increase. So I think everything is tight all around. For the library for sure, but also for the town, for the state, and for everybody. So I mean, I think that watching the budget very tightly is the smart thing to do. So those are my comments.
I appreciate you being so thorough in your explanation of how the hours are being divvied up and why they're happening the way they are. Especially, I didn't know that we had a second staff member who was out on a medical leave, or I didn't remember, I don't know which. And so you've really had to kind of shuffle people around. And so I appreciate not only you, but the staff at the library for being flexible with that. It can't be easy, especially in the wake of all the extra work that you're doing.
Thank you. Yes, it has been, like I said, there's no handbook to this. So we've really just been writing it on our own and making sure we're as careful as possible, whether it be with cleaning procedures, budget, any sort of building type projects that we're working on. And trust me, there are so many things right now that I would like to say yes to as far as projects, but I really have to triage everything, and making sure that we're still providing the information services that we always promise to our community is one of the most important things.
All right, I feel comfortable, Catherine, that you have addressed and explained the reasons behind some of the things that the treasurer was concerned about. If we have no more questions, shall we move on to agenda item 2?
Sure.
All right, let's move on to holiday policy in the personnel manual.
Okay. So I had sent the personnel policy manual just as a formality so that everybody had that and could go quickly to page 8 to the policy in question. So just a bit of background, there are 5 staff members which this policy applies to, and all of them work full-time at 35 hours per week. And I did list the 5 different positions in my notes to you all. Each of these staff members have a weekday off and work longer on the other 4 weekdays, and then they work every other Saturday. I do not know when this policy was enacted. I know there are certain time date stamps in the personnel policy manual, but prior to me coming in, it was never noted which sections were edited. So I really don't know when this policy was put in. So I included just a note to see the treasurer's email from Friday, August 28th to both you all and me about the holiday policy. So what I will say is that typically staff members opt to receive the pay instead of taking another day off within the month. And over the course of the year, they will take a few hours off here and there. So it is very difficult to track this time. We haven't really had a term to call it before. So I will say it doesn't just affect one staff member whose regular day is on Monday, because we know there are a lot of Monday holidays throughout the year, but all 5 staff members, we have days like Independence Day, that fluctuates. Thanksgiving is a Thursday. Christmas, New Year's, Veterans Day, those all fluctuate. So eventually this does affect all of the not Friday, but all of the weekday staff members. So I gave a few suggestions that the federal government calls it in lieu of holiday, so that they designate the day before the holiday as the employee's sort of holiday for pay. And I definitely agree that one of the reasons to clean this policy up is for fairness, so that it is formally stated when they have to take that time off, or given a more direct time frame. As far as budgetary concerns go, staff members are exceptionally close to their allotted hours. There are some weeks where they will take time off unpaid. I allow that. I have always allowed that. I don't know that there's a policy against that. And also there are some staff members who on their vacation weeks will opt to take less vacation. So again, I think we need a better way to track this and what to call it on our end. I agree that the policy should be changed for fairness. And I also think that we may at this time, because of COVID and how short we are as far as staff go, may want to make the policy adjustment altogether, but also have a sort of emergency policy, I guess you could say, that staff could take this time at some point in the year instead of within the month because things are so uncertain. So those are just my recommendations or requests. I also today sent you a list of different municipalities that I knew had holiday policies for their library staff. And I noted on that sheet that I used mostly union libraries, not Union Public Library, but libraries that have unions, and pulled their contracts because those had all gone through the legal processes. So we know that what they are saying about their holiday policy is solid. There were a lot of different suggestions that came from that document, a lot of different ways that different libraries and municipalities track that. And I also did realize something when I was going through, that I think what had happened with our Tiverton library policy and why it wasn't as clear in the manual, I think it was copy and pasted from the Tiverton AFSCME employees contract, but there was some extra language in the AFSCME contract that was not put over into ours. So I almost think that as far as history goes, that this was something that had changed with the town contract over time, but we had not changed in ours. So I could be wrong, but that's just one of my thoughts on that.
All right, you had made a recommendation as to what you thought the policy should say, and it was
Yes.
in the information that you sent to us. Chris and Kim, do you have any comments to make about Catherine's recommendations?
I want to go back and look at that again before I
Just a clarification. So you thought maybe you would change the time frame to than 1 month, right?
Yes.
So did you just say that you might want to change it to more than that, to a year?
If it could be within the fiscal year, that would be
Oh,
much appreciated. And at the end of the year, as long as everything equals out, I think that we have made the correct change. What did I want to look at? And I think the original issue with the policy manual is that it has an or in there.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
that is the confusing part right there.
I actually thought, I keep reading that paragraph and I think it's very confusing.
Yes, it is.
The or is confusing, but when you said the thing about it may have been a cut and paste thing, I'm like, that makes more sense to me, because at the end, I'm like, what is it that this is, what are they saying?
Yes.
So that was very confusing, I thought. So I think it's not a bad thing to clean it up. I only hesitate using the word emergency, because I think that I wouldn't use that, but if you could say, I mean, we could pick a time frame. It could be a month or 2 months, or mutual. It was one of the other phrases that some other community library use, mutual agreement between the director and the employee, because then you can take into account personal circumstances.
Yes. Yes.
And so there's some flexibility there for the employee. I mean, how do you feel about that?
I feel good about that, mostly because at the end of the day, I do what's best for Tiverton Public Library.
Yeah.
So that still leaves me with the option to say yes or no. I think if it had to be within a month, that is a very short time frame, and it might not be what's best for the library overall, for that person to take that time off in the month. So that would be a good change, a welcome change.
Well, the other thing, when we do all this, I mean, we could revisit this in 6 months, whatever we decide on, and see how this is working. Because again, we don't know what's going to happen within 6 months. It could be that there's other changes. So it's, so that would be the only request. I would just take out the emergency.
Yep.
That word, and that's,
I personally am happy with the recommended language of in lieu of.
Mhm.
And that will help us track it too, so that we can have an enumerated figure to that number that the staff member knows that they have to take. So if they want to leave an hour early one day, usually I'm amenable to that, and so on.
And you want that from the opm.gov website? You want that wording? The link that you put in II?
Yes, let me open it up just to reread it. So I would say we could call it in lieu of holiday, just so we can accurately track that time. But we're not requiring them to take the day off prior to the holiday and designating that. It would be that over the course of the fiscal year that they need to take that in lieu of holiday time off.
Catherine, can you update your recommendation based on this discussion right now and share it with us that we can take a look at?
Yes,
And
absolutely. And
if-
I'll make sure that you all have it prior to the regular meeting in September, because I'm guessing you'll want to finalize this in September.
If it were possible for you to
Can you
come
share
up
your
with this language right now so that we
sure.
could, as a committee, vote to recommend this to the entire board?
Absolutely. So I would recommend striking the 2 sentences in the personnel policy manual, just so we can sort of start clean, and say if let me pull up the language I had sent you from the municipal contracts. Let's see. If an employee is not scheduled to work on the day of the holiday, he will have another mutually agreed upon day off within the fiscal year. And I can
Oh,
add,
of course, if this happens like a couple of weeks before the fiscal year, I mean, if this happens in June, I mean, you always have to think of these things, right?
Yeah.
What could you do? Well, you could say, or I think if you covered it, if you said mutually exclusive, mutually agreed
Yep.
upon,
yes,
right?
upon by the employee and library director.
Yes. And you would try to do it the before the fiscal year. But of course, as soon as you say something before the fiscal year, it's going to happen. Like a week before the fiscal year, the person needs a time off.
Well, I will say too, that was one of the changes that before you had come on the board,
Mhm.
we began to allow employees to carry over 1 week of vacation time into the next fiscal year.
Okay.
So I actually make sure that they have their request into me by June 1st, because I don't want sort of like a flood of vacation happening in the
Yes, okay.
last 3 or 4 weeks of the year. So
Yeah. Okay. So that sounds
you're
like that.
used to it.
Yeah. Okay.
And with holidays, we know what they are in advance.
Mhm.
So
That
if
is
we
true.
if we can emphasize to employees that they need to be looking ahead.
Yes.
Well, it sounds like you remind them anyhow. So, yeah. Okay.
All right, do we have the final language?
Could you just read it one more time if you don't mind?
Sure. If an employee is not scheduled to work on the day of the holiday, he will have another mutually agreed upon day off during the fiscal year, mutually agreed upon between the employee and library director within the fiscal year.
Can I clean that up a little?
Sure. Yes, please.
I mean, If an employee is not scheduled to work on the day of the holiday, he or she will have another day off within the fiscal year, which is mutually agreed upon by the employee and the library director.
Perfect. And on our end, we will track it as, I'll designate a name because now that I'm thinking about it, in lieu of holiday might not be the best name for it. So I'll have to search for a name on that.
Bob.
What'd you say?
I think that's sort of like a behind the scenes type thing though.
I
Karen-
like
Just being,
it.
I'm just being silly.
Karen and I, so Karen's our office administrator, so she keeps track of vacation, sick time,
Okay.
my personal time. So I'll come up with a term that best suits it, but for now we could call it in lieu of holiday.
Okay.
Because we are paying them for the holiday.
Yeah.
It's more that we need like minus holiday time, I guess you could say.
All right, I move that the Personnel Committee approve this language that Kim just read. And we recommend that the entire board approve this language addition to the Personnel Policy Manual. Is there a second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
All right. So Kim, can you're taking minutes.
Mhm.
Can you send that out to us and we'll be able to
Yep.
include that with the agenda?
Within the next
Sure.
half hour or so, I will have the minutes done and I will
I'm
share.
sorry, that's too long. Could you do faster? All right, I think that's it, unless we have any other questions. No, we are adjourned then. Thank you very much, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you.